Typhoon Podul tears through eastern Taiwan. We look at the storm's impact on local communities. U.S. chip companies are stuck between a rock and a hard place, with Washington demanding a cut of their China sales and Beijing rejecting their products.
We already saw NVIDIA, for example, pull back by, I think it's $50 billion pullback on a 10-year forecast because of its loss of China. So I think we can be, looking at similar.
U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian leader Vladimir Putin are set to meet in Alaska to talk about the war in Ukraine.
Well, we're going to have a meeting with Vladimir Putin, and at the end of that meeting, probably in the first 2 minutes, I'll know exactly whether or not a deal can be made.
Plus, Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. says he wants a code of conduct in the South China Sea as maritime tensions with China heat up. Good evening and welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Eric Gao. Typhoon Podul made landfall in Taiwan on Wednesday afternoon, bringing gusts of over 200 kilometers per hour to some parts of the country. Thousands of homes lost power. Parts of southern Taiwan are expected to see heavy rain into Wednesday night. President Lai Ching-te says he wants the National Communications Commission to set up protocols to help preserve Taiwan's telecoms infrastructure during typhoons.
我也希望通传会能够特别留意因为如果电线杆倒塌，或者是说基地台损坏，那除了电跟水是民众重要的需求以外，通讯也是所以我希望我们通传会应该要有积极的应变措施。
Podul's left Taiwan a few hours after making landfall. While it was here, it brought severe weather throughout eastern Taiwan. Hundreds of local residents in a remote part of Hualien County had to evacuate. The intense weather has them worried about their homes. Irene Lin reports.
Heavy rain and winds have pummeled this rural town in the eastern county of Hualien. It is one of 14 cities and counties in Taiwan to be hit by moderate Typhoon Podul. Inside this temporary shelter, hundreds of local residents from 3 riverside towns have been waiting here since Tuesday due to the imminent threat of a dam that is close to breaching. Residents have lived near the dam for decades, and there have been a few evacuation warnings in the past. But after a major 7.2 magnitude earthquake last April and 2 back-to-back storms this July altered the landscape around the dam, people are more anxious than ever.
怕那个洋流台风如果豪雨量超过400、600，可能就满了，满了之后可能会溃堤，所以大家还紧张当然很希望说中央把那个溃堤部分或溃堤的余力赶快消除掉不要每次台风来我们就很紧张到底会溃堤这些基本因为下来不是水而已里面可能夹杂一些土石流、一些树枝这种东西，危害很大了。
Many of the residents who still live in these towns are elderly people who need substantial care, as the younger generation has moved out to seek work elsewhere. The military has helped to move them to this shelter. None had the time to pack their valuables before being evacuated, only some basic essentials to get them through the waiting period.
我都吓到了，大家都紧张死了。我们长久以来到现在就第一次了，没有，我们就只有拿自己身上 贵重的东西了，当然贵重东西就金钱而已其他没有了。
It wasn't easy to leave their homes of the past 3 to 4 decades. Some say they were reluctant to evacuate. Still, they try to stay positive.
朋友说你不撤离的话要罚款的，如果你发生事情的话，乡公所是政府没有补助，好了下来，留着青山在，不怕没柴烧，是不是这样子呢？
The shelter used to be a student dorm of a vocational high school. The principal worked with the township office to provide not only food and water, but also a space as comfortable as possible for the town locals.
现在3个楼层加起来，总共大概有140位民众。那学校提供学生宿舍的主要考量还是以民众的生活便利性为主，因为这边有比较足够的淋浴空间跟如厕的空间。那民众在这边这几天的生活，应该也会比较接近日常的生活方式。
The Central Weather Administration has predicted that the storm would leave the Hualien region on Wednesday evening. With more heavy rainfalls coming, authorities are still deciding whether it's safe enough for the locals to return home.
It's the first and hopefully the only night that these people have had to seek shelter here. They're all waiting for the government to announce that they're safe to return home and hoping that when they do, the typhoon will have left their town unscathed. Justin Wu, Scott Huang, and Irene Lin in Hualien for TaiwanPlus.
The White House says companies beyond NVIDIA and AMD may have to pay a 15% fee on their China chip sales if they want to do business there. That's as China grills its tech companies on why they want U.S. chips in the first place. Chris Gorn reports on what's at stake for both sides.
More U.S. chip makers might have to pay up if they want to sell in China, according to the White House, which reached a deal with NVIDIA and AMD to hand over 15% of profits from their China sales in exchange for export licenses.
Well, look, right now it stands with these two companies. Perhaps it could expand in the future to other companies. I think it's a creative idea and solution. The legality of it, the mechanics of it is still being ironed out by the Department of Commerce, and I would defer you to them for any further details on how it will actually be implemented.
At stake are AI chips like NVIDIA's H20, built specifically for China to meet U.S. export restrictions. But it's unclear if Beijing wants to let them in. Chinese officials have reportedly questioned tech giants like Tencent and ByteDance over why they're buying H20s instead of domestic chips, according to Reuters. And for NVIDIA, the China market is too big to ignore.
We already saw NVIDIA, for example, pull back by, I think it was $50 billion pullback on a 10-year forecast because of its loss of China. So I think we can be, looking at similar.
The H20 is faster than chips made in China, but still slower than NVIDIA's top of the line. And China is trying to change that, part of its long-term strategy to bolster its own chip industry, regardless of U.S. restrictions.
无论是航天科技还是芯片制造，外部施加的无理打压从未停歇过。但哪里有封锁，哪里就有突围；哪里有打压，哪里就有创新。
The fate of the H20 may hinge on a future trade deal between Washington and Beijing, whose officials are due to meet in the coming months following a 90-day tariff truce. And that outcome could set the stage for the next AI race. John Su and Chris Gorin for TaiwanPlus.
For more on China's domestic chip push and the needs of its AI companies, Chris Gorin spoke with Chim Lee, senior analyst at the Economist Intelligence Unit.
Reuters reports that Chinese officials have grilled tech companies like Tencent and ByteDance on why they're buying American chips like NVIDIA's H20 rather than domestically made but slower Chinese chips. But China also wants to become an AI leader, so do you see this as a change?
We actually think that is a continuation of the policy trends we've been seeing. So China has been very much emphasizing the security aspects of its technology. We have seen quite a lot of narratives around self-sufficiency and indigenous innovation over the last decade or two at this point. So in this context, we have seen, in fact, the Chinese government has been encouraging the state-owned enterprises in the public sector to use domestic alternatives already. So now it is really sort of expanding it to also the non-state sector as well. So the largest tech companies in China, essentially like sort of encouraging them, incentivizing them to use domestic alternatives rather than the imported chips.
What do American chips like the H20 have over their Chinese competition?
Yeah, so if we look at the hardware aspect, there are still Chinese options are still a little bit lagging behind, although they've been catching up. So over the last few years, we have seen the domestic alternatives gaining foothold gradually, and in fact, they've been eating into NVIDIA's market share over time already. Now, the main problem is not just about the hardware, but also about the software aspect as well. So NVIDIA has a very mature software ecosystem. So in this context, we think the domestic alternatives semiconductors, they are, as described by many of those in the industry, they're like the domestic options are usable, but they're not necessarily the best they can use at the moment.
You know, if I'm a Chinese AI company, I probably want the best, right? I don't want to compromise. If the Trump administration is willing to sell us the H20 or even the next generation Blackwell chips, I want it, right? So are the goals of Chinese AI companies in tension with the goals of the Chinese government here?
Yeah, there are a little bit of tensions there we can see. So I think this is particularly in the context of the Trump administration signaling that they may be interested in approving even more advanced chips to be exported to China. So for tech companies in China, and when they're thinking about R&D, when they're thinking of developing new models or even new applications, having the best chips in the market tend to be doing better. So in this context, like there will always be a little bit of tensions between the tech companies and the Chinese government's goals in terms of developing domestic alternatives, particularly by expanding the market for the domestic chips.
The chips in question are US designed, but are made by Taiwan's TSMC. So if they're prevented from being sold in China, will that impact the chip industry here in Taiwan?
Yeah, so there will be some hit to chip sales, right? So assuming that if the Chinese companies are actually not able to use the NVIDIA chips because of either US export controls or because of Chinese policy measures, then that means that Taiwanese manufacturers, they are not necessarily able to manufacture the chips and sell and in turn. But on the other hand, we have seen very, very strong AI chip demand. Particularly in the US and to a less extent in other markets as well. So the hit will be there, but it's not necessarily as big as one would assume.
That was Chim Lee from the Economist Intelligence Unit. Shares of Taiwan chip giant TSMC reached their highest ever price today at about $40 per share. That follows decisions to increase investments in advanced processes and overseas facilities. TSMC's board authorized more than $20 billion for building more advanced tech and packaging capacity. It said it will phase out its 6-inch wafer production as it focuses on more advanced technologies. It also said it would inject up to $10 billion in its foreign subsidiaries to avoid foreign exchange risks. Taiwan's economy minister says the country may need to continue its investments in the U.S. to secure a lower tariff rate from Washington.
我们台湾去谈，我在想跟大家互动，我说我现在无事情哦，不能做歹讲。
Kuo made the comments at an energy forum on Wednesday. It comes as Taiwan's government works to lower a 20% tariff on most of its goods to the U.S. The economy minister also said a new Taiwan trade office, due to open in Texas this month, would help support Taiwanese businesses in the U.S.
我们在这个月可能会把这个德州的 贸易服务中心建立起来，然后接着可能会建立在这个其他的州。主要的目的还是帮助我们中小企业、中小微型企业在做出口的时候具有更大的这个竞争力。
Taiwan already has trade centers in the Czech Republic and Japan to support businesses with investment issues overseas. An Air Force base in Alaska is getting ready to host U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin for a meeting on the war in Ukraine. There's a wide range of views about what the talks could achieve, from optimism to concern and skepticism. John Van Trieste reports.
In just a few days, the eyes of the world will be focused on this U.S. Air Force base in Alaska. It's a bit quiet here right now, but come Friday, Trump and Putin will be here face to face, trying to make some kind of progress on ending the Russia-Ukraine war. There's even talk Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky could come too. Washington is already abuzz, with the White House press secretary getting a range of questions about what will and won't happen during the talks.
Are you optimistic that a deal will emerge from this meeting, or is he simply going to listen?
I think this is a listening exercise for the president. Look, only one party that's involved in this war is going to be present. And so this is for the president to go and to get, again, a more firm and better understanding of how we can hopefully bring this war to an end.
And Trump himself appears confident about the meeting.
Well, we're going to have a meeting with Vladimir Putin, and at the end of that meeting, probably in the first 2 minutes, I'll know exactly whether or not a deal can be made.
How will you know that?
because that's what I do. I make deals.
But not everyone feels so upbeat, especially in Europe. Trump's suggestions of a land swap between Russia and Ukraine appear to be non-starters, even among those who welcome Trump's diplomacy. A statement by EU leaders, minus Hungary, reads that, quote, international borders must not be changed by force. The people of Ukraine must have the freedom to decide their future. Poland's prime minister has been especially direct, saying that his own country's interests are directly tied to Ukraine holding on to its territory.
To znaczy, Ukraina nie może tej wojny przegrać. I nikt nie ma prawa wywierać presji na Ukrainę, jeśli chodzi o ustępstwa terytorialne czy inne decyzje, które pachniałyby kapitulacją.
Some observers have questions about what the meeting might achieve too, thinking it's a chance for Putin to gain Trump's ear to his own advantage.
This is one of the key objectives of the Kremlin ahead of the Trump-Putin summit in Alaska. It's putting forward proposals that are unacceptable for Ukraine in order to present Ukraine as an uncooperative and ungrateful actor to Trump's peace brokering efforts. And in turn, that could also create and drive a wedge between the US and the European allies.
And one former Trump advisor says there may be motives behind the meeting that go beyond ending the fighting.
Listening to Trump's public comments, I think Putin is beginning to work his magic, and that will change Trump's view again, not because he suddenly looked at the line in Zaporizhia and decided it could be moved 3 miles one way or another. That doesn't have anything to do with it. It's, does he think his friend Vladimir is now cooperating to make a deal so that Trump can get the Nobel Peace Prize?
But the outcome of Friday's meeting is not certain, leaving room for at least some progress towards ending more than 3 years of war. Luffy Li and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
The Philippines has referred to a crash between 2 Chinese ships in the disputed South China Sea as dangerous maneuvers and unlawful interference. The Chinese vessels collided with each other on Monday during a Filipino Coast Guard mission in waters near the Scarborough Shoal. Philippine Coast Guard footage showed a Chinese Coast Guard vessel trailing its ship before a Chinese Navy vessel suddenly cut across its path and crashed into the Chinese Coast Guard ship. It marks the first known collision between Chinese vessels in the area, which has also drawn criticism from the U.S. as a reckless action. As maritime tensions between the Philippines and China rise, Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is calling for a binding code of conduct in the South China Sea. To find out more about what that would mean, our reporter Alan Liu spoke to Renato Cruz de Castro, a distinguished professor at De La Salle University.
President Marcos Jr. says a South China Sea Code of Conduct could help prevent escalation in the region. Could you walk us through why this Code of Conduct matters?
The Code of Conduct does not intend to address the root cause of the dispute in the South China Sea, which is, of course, as shown by the 2016 Arbitral Tribunal ruling on the South China Sea, it is Chinese maritime expansion. The Code of Conduct is silent about this matter. The Code of Conduct simply aims to manage the dispute by fostering a regime of confidence building so that the claimant states would develop trust with each other and will, of course, would not consider the use of force.
How do you expect ASEAN members to line up on a binding Code of Conduct? And where do you see common grounds and sticking points?
So even within the 4 claimant states, there is a division in terms of what will be the geographic scope of the Code of Conduct. Then again, another bone of contention among the ASEAN member states, some ASEAN member states would simply see the Code of Conduct as a sort of a simple political document that would manage a dispute. Of course, in the case of the Philippines and to a certain degree Vietnam, both the Philippines and Vietnam are, of course, advancing the position that a code of conduct should be based on international law. Specifically, of course, the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea, and even the July 12, 2016 Arbitral Tribunal ruling. So even among the ASEAN member states, there are, of course, issues regarding what will be the nature of the code of conduct.
How effective do you think the Philippines has been in countering Chinese gray zone tactics in the region?
China, of course, has basically all the aces in the sleeves. It has, of course, the largest navy in the world. It has, of course, the largest coast guard in the world. It has basically militarized the features, the land features in the South China Sea. So it's not simply a matter of Philippines being effective. What President Marcos said, whether despite the fact that all the odds are against us, we simply have no choice but to stand on our ground. Because if we are simply overwhelmed by China, how will other countries look at how we have to deal with Chinese coercive action and Chinese expansion, not only the South China Sea, but also against Taiwan?
That was Renato Cruz de Castro, a distinguished professor at De La Salle University. The wife of South Korea's impeached former president Yoon Suk-yeol has been arrested on bribery charges. A Seoul court issued an arrest warrant for former First Lady Kim Kyung-hee close to midnight on Tuesday, saying there was a risk that Kim could destroy evidence. She and her husband face multiple corruption accusations, which they both deny. The former president has been in jail since July 10th, awaiting trial for his failed attempt to impose martial law back in December. Taiwan People's Party Chair Huang Kuo-chang says nuclear power has majority support here in Taiwan. He cited polls showing that 2/3 of Taiwanese people back restarting one of the country's nuclear plants.
非常多不同的机构，包括台湾民众党在内，我们针对国人、针对核三研议的态度做了全国性的民调。多数的民众都支持立法院修法延长核电厂的使用年限，高达70%的民意支持核三厂在通过整体安全评估后继续运转。
Huang was speaking at a debate over nuclear power use here in Taiwan. The country will hold a referendum on August 23rd, asking voters if they support restarting the Ma'an-san nuclear power plant in southern Taiwan. Huang's remarks come after a poll from the Taiwanese Public Opinion Foundation found that 66% of respondents are in favor of restarting the plant. During the debate, Huang's opponent argued that doing so would come with huge safety risks, as the surrounding area is seismically active.
台电也对核三重新进行地质调查，并在最新的报告中指出，被归类为活动断层的恒春断层直接穿越了核三厂的厂址，并且距离反应炉不到900公尺。
The referendum will be held alongside recall votes for 7 KMT lawmakers. 2 fiber artists in Nantou, down in central Taiwan, have been seeking the natural colors of the country for decades. Our reporter Sandy Chi met up with them to find out what this means.
Trimming leaves off a tree, chopping them into pieces, and boiling these natural materials, all to explore the natural colors of Taiwan. 69-year-old fiber artist Chen Jingling has been researching and exploring Taiwan's varied colors for decades. He finds his dyes in nature, including from animals, plants, and natural fuels.
台湾的天然染料其实是非常丰富。那它的丰富是因为它在亚热带地方而且是一个海洋性气候这个环境温暖、潮湿、多雨。那所以植物的生长非常茂盛，种类也很多。
Though Taiwan has an abundance of natural materials, the traditional dyeing technique Chen uses once disappeared. During the Industrial Revolution, synthetic dyes replaced natural ones in the local textile sector. To revive this lost technique and culture, Chen and his wife, Ma Yu-shou, have discovered more than 2,000 shades unique to Taiwan. This process has not been easy. Even the tiniest variation in dye production can alter the final product.
那有些它一年到头它没有太大差别，但是有些植物它的光照、它的水分、它的养分，就会影响它的色素。
它长得最茂盛的时候，它染出来颜色就最漂亮。那对它但是有时候它在开花结果的时候，它生命的能量跑到花果上面去了。哎，那个时间反而拿出来染色不一定漂亮哈。
Among all the colors, the most commonly seen in Taiwan is blue or indigo. This is the very color Chen used to create his most challenging work, currently on display at a cultural exhibition in Osaka. Titled Mother River of Taiwan, the piece took Chen more than 1,000 hours to complete. It reflects not only his mastery of his art, but also his profound bond with the land.
我的童年的生活跟浊水溪就离不开关系。那我们知道，台湾浊水溪啊是台湾最长的一条河流，产生了台湾最重要的蓬莱米的文化。这一条河流孕育了台湾的农作的生长，这个抚养了台湾的众多的人民。
After decades of exploring Taiwan's natural colors, this journey has taught Chen and Ma about more than just the past and this dyeing technique, but also life lessons for nature.
有时候我们会从植物的身上里找到，我们要把我们在不一样的生命时光有不一样的展现。像我们现在也是走到这个人生的中老年了，那我们也很希望在用我们这个阶段，我们能够再做一些传承，也就像那个满地的落叶，但是它能够形成怎么样的美丽，我们也可以跟他们学习。
While they've discovered over 2,000 natural shades already, Chen and Ma say their job is still far from done. The couple will continue to unearth the true colors of Taiwan. Hangshu, Devontai, and Sanichi for TaiwanPlus.
And thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, here's more images of the impact of Typhoon Podul along Taiwan's southeast coast. I'm Eric Gao. Take care of yourselves.